So, it's pretty clear from my last video on this topic that I need to cover it again because I think there are some key misunderstandings with what I said in that video. I had absolutely no idea that me talking about writing a good magic system would get so many angry people in my comment sections writing essays of their own. Granted, it's still the vocal minority, but it was a sizable enough amount that I figured I might as well make a follow-up on it. Now, what was interesting to me, though, is that they all seemed to have the same arguments, but those arguments didn't make any sense if you actually watched the video. It's almost like they came from a tweet which didn't actually link back to my video and purported me to say something I didn't say. But hey, I'm here for the discussion. It's too bad, though, that a lot of people who didn't like that video on magic systems either didn't seem to watch it or simply did not understand what I was trying to say in that video. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you've made a statement and then someone else misunderstood your statement and then they proceeded to angrily and accidentally agree with you? Well, that's kind of what happened with that video. See, a lot of people made the argument that soft magic is not better than hard magic, and that's something I agree with. They also claimed that sometimes the appeal of a magic system is learning all of its intricacies and nuances. That's also something I agree with. And then a lot of those comments turned around and said, just because you like soft magic systems more doesn't mean that hard magic systems are bad writing. And that's strange to me because while I agree with the general sentiment, I don't agree that that's what I was claiming. So imagine my confusion when I'm stuck in a scenario like this one. Soft magic and hard magic systems are equally good! Yeah! I like hard magic systems better than soft magic! Yeah! This guy said he hates hard magic. Let's get him! Yeah! Hi, I'm Scriptwriter. You're probably wondering how I got caught up in a situation like this. Well, it all started in the summer of 2024 when I allowed HarleyTBS to make a thumbnail for one of my videos. Jujutsu Kaisen fans never forgave me for that thumbnail, but they did get a bit quieter once the final chapter of the manga dropped. That was the old me, and it never happens to me anymore because these days I use Aura. With this video's sponsor, Aura, I never have to worry about HarleyTBS sneaking into my computer and changing my thumbnails to get me into controversy. But even if you're not terrorized by a random British commentary YouTuber, you might still want to listen because hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth dates. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free online. I don't know about you guys, but as a person who has had their passwords stolen in the past, that sort of thing is incredibly terrifying to me. Oftentimes, we think that it can't happen to us until it does, and we're left without any idea of what to do or who to call. Even if you're doing your best to keep your identity safe, things like this can still happen, and they are out of your control. By the time you realize it has, it will already be too late. That's why it's so important to get ahead of it and prepare for the worst. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal online information before, this should be a huge wake-up call. But for me personally, I'm not too worried about it because I use Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They also gave me up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, should the worst case scenario ever happen to me again. There's also a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one easy-to-use app. You can go to my link at aura.com/scrit to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data has been exposed. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/scrit and try 2 weeks for free. What do you think of that, cutaway gag me? Oh. To be fair to the critics, I don't think I worded myself correctly in some instances, and when I made that video, I did not even know about hard or soft magic systems as much as I do now. However, now that I do know more about hard and soft magic systems, I can safely say that the comment section of that video absolutely fucking doesn't. And the advice I give in that video is still applicable regardless of whether or not you are writing a hard magic system or a soft one. Brandon Sanderson is a successful author who many people pretend to read the books of, and fewer actually do read. I happen to fall into the latter category as I have started to read through his Mistborn series. It's very clear from reading his works that Brandon Sanderson knows how to make a good magic system. But what we're most interested in, for the sake of this video, is Brandon Sanderson's advice on writing magic systems. Brandon Sanderson has coined the term hard and soft magic, and you would think with all the experts in my comment sections trying to tell me what hard and soft magic is and how it's distinguished, that there would be a very clear list of outlined rules which separates the two into these binary categories. But to my disappointment, hard and soft magic isn't really a well-defined term by Brandon Sanderson. Or rather, it's not what people think it is. Most people like to confuse complexity with hard magic, and that's just not how hard magic is distinguished. For example, in my last video on magic systems, people in my comment sections have the false impression that if a magic system is meticulously plotted out, complex, and consistent, then it is a hard magic system. Whereas if the magic system is simple, easy to understand, and can be explained in a couple of sentences, then it is a soft magic system. On top of that, people love to put magic systems into one box or the other, which is another mistake stemming from people just misunderstanding what those terms mean. Hard and soft magic is not a binary. It's a spectrum, and it has nothing to do with how complex or simple the magic system is. The truth is, the measure of whether something is hard magic or soft magic is only judged on how much the audience understands about the magic system you've created for your story. It's more about how much the audience knows about your magic system, rather than how complex or well-defined it is outside of the story. Let's take Frieren as an example, because I love talking about that show whenever I can on this channel, and nobody can stop me. Most people seem to believe that Frieren is a soft magic system much in the same vein as the Tolkien novels which inspired it, and that's just not true. If anything, Frieren is a fairly hard magic system. It's just a simple and easy to understand magic system. We know how the magic system of Frieren works. Magic casters have a pool of mana which they can call upon to form spells. They cannot cast spells they cannot truly envision. If a caster believes a spell works in a certain way, then the magic will work in that way. Visualization and imagination is at the heart of Frieren's magic system, and even though it is easy to understand and simple, we the audience still know about these rules because they've been conveyed to us in the story. However, we do not have all of the information about Frieren's magic system, at least not yet. So, Frieren lies somewhere on the spectrum between hard and soft magic. It's hard to say if Frieren is a soft magic system with hard elements, or a hard magic system with soft elements. I personally think it's the latter, given how much we've been taught about it, and how much more we've got left in the story to learn about it. If we were to think of a true soft magic system, we would have to look at stories like Mary Poppins, wherein the magic simply happens, and is never explained to the audience. There's magic in Mary Poppins, and we're shown what she can do with that magic, but the rules of her magic are never fully explained or addressed at all in her story. As far as we know, there are no rules to Mary Poppins' magic. For all we know, she charges her mana pool up every time she feels the need to help and teach a British child some proper manners. Another good example of a soft magic system which is great for the SEO and thumbnail of this video is Amazing Digital Circus. And if you're thinking to yourself, Amazing Digital Circus doesn't have a magic system, I want you to take a second to really think about what you just said while looking at Kane. Go on. Tell his whimsical ass he's not magical. Yeah, that's what I thought. See, this is the reason I think a lot of people get confused on the difference between a true soft magic system and a magic system with both hard and soft elements. Amazing Digital Circus's magic system is not explained at all, nor will it probably ever be. Kane just does magic as some sort of omnipotent god, and that's about all we know. Sure, we might assume that his magic is some sort of admin or game dev access which allows him to teleport, spawn, and despawn NPCs, as well as create entire worlds from nothing, but at the end of the day, we the audience really know nothing about how his magic works, even if we know what it can do. But what if you're in the comment section right now and you disagree with the indisputable and objective facts about what hard and soft magic actually measures? What if you want to tell me that I just still hate hard magic systems like Jujutsu Kaisen and Hunter x Hunter? I mean, yeah, you can do that. You're entitled to your wrong opinion, but perhaps you would like to hear me out for a second before you make assumptions based on a random tweet from a person who never watched my video and just made shit up based on what they saw in the thumbnail. Do I hate hard magic systems like JJK or Hunter x Hunter? No. And in fact, I love those magic systems, and just like JJK, I've taken some inspiration from Hunter x Hunter when it comes to my own magic system. Cause if you haven't understood this by now, my last video on this topic was never about telling people hard magic sucked and soft magic was better, nor was my intention to prop myself up on a pedestal and proclaim myself as the one true writer with supreme knowledge of storytelling. I make eye-catching thumbnails and titles to get people to click, and then I lay out my notes, thoughts, and opinions on whatever subject I want to talk about. I teach what I know so that I can understand what I know better. I don't know how much I need to say in my video, in my opinion, or I feel this way, or I think this way, to impress upon people that when I make these videos, I'm giving an opinion. One thing that I will say as a matter of objective fact, however, is that I do not hate hard magic systems, nor do I think that they are inferior. And the reason this is a fact is because the book I am writing is literally a fantasy novel with a hard magic system. Even if you happen to disagree with what hard and soft magic is, and you think that complexity is a necessary requirement for hard magic, then the magic system I write about in my own book would still be considered a hard magic system by your standards. It would be incredibly stupid of me to be making the argument that we should do away with hard magic systems and adopt soft magic instead just because I thought that they were better or something. I want people to read my book. You understand, right? Why would I try to convince everyone in my comment section to hate hard magic if my book is hard magic? The point of my last video was not to say whether or not hard or soft magic was good or bad. So, if I don't hate hard magic systems, then what was the point of the last video? Well, I'll tell you. The point of my last video on this subject was to talk about how we convey our magic systems to the audience, not how much we convey over the course of the entire story. My advice was to find the stories, allegories, and lore behind your magic instead of relying on exposition dumping and the narrator's voice to explain away all of the minutia of your magic system. I was advocating that you feed the audience just enough answers to give them room to speculate about your magic system during the story, but not too much that it became akin to cramming for a math exam. I also advocated for making sure that your magic system is easy to understand, regardless of whether or not it is a complex or simple magic system. And this brings me to my next point about magic systems and why you still suck at writing them. It's that you're confusing the terms complex and convoluted. Complexity does not mean something is difficult to understand. Sure, something which is complex has a higher chance of being more complicated or, by proxy, convoluted, but they are not one and the same. Complexity just means that you have a lot of elements to something. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's difficult to understand. You can have a complex, hard magic system, which is easy to understand and convey to people. Brandon Sanderson's novels are a great example of this, but so is Hunter x Hunter and JJK, at least JJK in the first couple seasons. Alright, let me address the JJK in the room now that the manga has wrapped up. The critique I have with the magic system in JJK is not a critique of the magic system itself, because it's mostly just Hunter x Hunter's magic system with extra steps, but rather how poorly conveyed it starts to become after the Shibuya incident. JJK actively goes from a relatively hard magic system to a nonsensical, convoluted mess of binding vows and walls of text to answer questions no one was actually asking about the magic system. And yes, I am a manga reader for JJK, so anything I say from here on will be a spoiler for anime-only watchers. Skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to be spoiled. After the Shibuya incident, JJK is left with a power vacuum to fill, not only with the political structures left behind and unattended by the massacre in Shibuya, but also by the powerful sorcerers which were either killed or sealed away. There's also a vacuum of interesting and likable characters post-Shibuya incident. Nanami is dead, Nobara is implied to be dead and won't show up until the manga's almost over, Toge has no arms, Todo has no hands, and that's just after Shibuya. Plenty of other pre-established characters also get killed off right after this arc. And don't even get me started on how many interesting, likable characters just die before they can be fully fleshed out in favor of a slew of new, incredibly boring and annoying characters. I could go into great detail about how poorly executed Maki's Zenin clan destruction arc was, or how annoyingly useless most of the pre-established surviving cast seems to be to the overall plot following Shibuya. However, that doesn't really have anything to do with JJK's magic system. The issue with JJK's magic system has always been present, but until the manga ended, we always had the idea that maybe it would get better, and it's an issue which only got worse as new characters and abilities were introduced into the story, as well as binding vows which are never fully explained even if you read the entire manga and do a ton of research looking up the external explanations of why certain things work the way they did. I could describe JJK's magic system pretty succinctly as such. Everyone in Japan produces cursed energy from their bodies without knowing it. Sorcerers are people with the unique gift of being able to control the cursed energy they output, which is why they can use and enhance their physical attributes. Some can use techniques unique to them, which provides a wide variety of unique abilities in the universe. Cursed energy is negative and can be turned positive if you multiply it in on itself. This is called reverse curse technique. It's basically a power that gives the user a healing factor. Sorcerers can also manifest a domain based on their cursed energy to create a zone where their cursed techniques automatically hit their intended target. Some sorcerers can also create simple domains, which is basically putting on a suit of armor against this effect, or being in a bubble which isolates you from those effects. Black flashes exist, and they are basically critical hits of cursed energy which have a higher chance of popping off the more locked in on battle you are. In addition, curse techniques and their effectiveness depends on the understanding of the sorcerer using them, as well as the opponent they use it against. There are also binding vows which people can take by sacrificing some sort of advantage to get something else in return. One of the most common examples of a binding vow in JJK is telling someone how your ability works, which then makes your ability stronger as a result. Or to put it in even shorter, more simple terms, Jujutsu sorcerers have a pool of cursed energy which they can call upon to form cursed techniques. If a sorcerer believes a spell works a certain way, then the magic will work in that way. Visualization and imagination is at the heart of JJK's magic system. Yes, even though many people may like to think that JJK's magic system is more complex and well thought out or less generic than Frierin's magic system, their core principles are the same. And in fact, Frieren is actually a harder magic system than JJK because of how little any of us understand about binding vows, even at the end of the story. The more complexity you introduce into your magic system, the more things a person must learn about that magic system to fully understand it. If we take two magic systems, each with a certain number of rules, and we know the same amount of rules between both of those magic systems, then the one with 10 rules will be more well understood than the magic system with 20 rules. Let's say we took Magic System A and it had 10 rules. And then we took Magic System B and it has 20 rules. Magic System B is more complex, whereas Magic System A is more simple. Now, let's imagine that in both Magic System A and Magic System B, we know 5 of the rules. Well, in Magic System A, we know about 50% of the Magic System, whereas in Magic System B, we only know about 25% of the Magic System. In this way, Magic System A is a harder Magic System than Magic System B, because Magic System B has a ton of unexplained rules, and therefore we don't understand nearly as much about it as we do for Magic System A. The more complexity you introduce in your magic system, the more things a person needs to learn about the magic system to fully understand it. In the case of JJK, much of their magic system is contradictory and unreliable. New rules are introduced on the fly without any proper build-up beforehand. People still don't know why Sukuna and Gojo can fly, or how Wiwi's technique even works at all. Because, unfortunately for the JJK fanbase, we have to do a lot of speculation to understand anything about its magic system. Because we never truly get a magic system that's fully fleshed out to us, since Gege, the writer of JJK, has some sort of medical aversion to both drawing Gojo and explaining things in simple terms. I mean, my brother in Christ, he has a terminal case of flapping gums disease. I'm talking some bloviator syndrome. He's got a real case of verbose veins in his writing hand, cause it's afflicted with yathritis. Oftentimes, it feels as if Gege needs to tell the audience about all the extra little details of why a curse technique works one way for one person, but not for the other. We see an example of this in the Shibuya incident, where the narrator is telling us about Choso's abilities, stating that the reason blood magic users don't often harden the blood in their veins is because they would contract thrombosis. And what is thrombosis, you might ask? It's blood clots. It's just a fancy term for blood clots. Mind you, this is also a fact we don't really need to know in the moment that it is exposited to us, because no one outside of a nerd is going to be thinking about how Choso can harden his blood in his veins and not die from a fucking blood clot. And yet Gege feels the need to pull the audience aside and say, "Oh yeah, by the way, here are XYZ details about why this hasn't been done before." When we would all have been perfectly fine not knowing these extra details at all, since they are neither relevant to understanding the magic system nor appreciating the story itself. Tell me, truthfully and honestly, as a JJK fan, if knowing that Choso's ability to harden his blood in his veins causing thrombosis for other cursed blood users was necessary exposition for the moment that it is told to us. Especially when the truly important details are often tossed to the wayside in lieu of giving us worthless pseudo-scientific explanation of cursed techniques. Gege will go into great detail about all the minutiae no one aside from him was wondering about, only to ignore the bigger questions about his magic system for the sake of having a cheap reveal later down the line. Binding vows are a great example of this. As much as many people like to claim JJK is a hard magic system, there's really not a lot that we know about how it functions. Binding vows are a great example of this. As much as many people like to claim JJK is a hard magic system, there's really not a lot we know about how they function. We know that a sorcerer can undertake a binding vow by sacrificing something in exchange to empower their curse technique in a certain way, but that's about it. Who keeps track of binding vows? Is it some sort of deity? What happens when you violate a binding vow? Why is Sukuna even afraid of violating a binding vow in that instance? Can a binding vow be used for anything? Can you take a binding vow to undo a binding vow? Does a greater sacrifice mean greater power? And if so, what distinguishes a great sacrifice from something that's not as great? Spoilers for the manga, but every time Sukuna uses binding vows, it always feels like a crutch to get Sukuna out of a corner Gege has ridden himself into. Binding vows were directly inspired by Hunter x Hunter's magic system, but Gege kinda went off the rails trying to distinguish it. But you see, when a writer is just kind of bullshitting their way through a complex magic system, these things tend to happen. Gege's writing and his magic system are reactive, not proactive. He didn't even expect to be writing JJK for as long as he was. It's the whole reason he killed off Itadori in the first few chapters of the manga. Now, I know a lot of JJK fans will probably rush to the comment sections to defend their favorite shonen, and I welcome those comments. However, while you're furiously typing away at your essay, I should mention that this reactive style of writing is something I will do from time to time as well. And yes, to the audience, a well-planned magic system is often just an illusion. This kind of brings me to my next point as to why you still suck at writing magic systems. I would bet that most writers are reactive when writing their magic systems. They've probably got the core concept written down prior to creating the story, but sometimes there are moments in the story which occur where you must invent new rules for a pre-established system. However, even though I do this myself, I would also advise against doing this. Don't be like Gege or me. If you find that your magic system is constantly pushing you to over-explain it so that people can understand it, then take a step back from your writing and try to think of ways you can provide a simpler explanation instead. The simple solution is often the best one, and it keeps things from getting tangled. Now, I understand there are people out there who love to learn about magic systems and unpacking all of the many rules of those systems, but this advice is still applicable. This is one of the things that I personally struggled with when I was writing out my rough draft for my book. And I do emphasize rough draft because that is where this sort of writing should be left behind if you have the time to do so as a writer. To give someone like Gege some credit, they likely don't have enough time to fully flesh out their story before they need to come up with the plot of their next chapter. Mangakas are often overworked and underpaid, and many of them do not live to be older than 60 before they keel over from decades of stressful deadlines. It's very clear that the unsustainable nature of long-running weekly shonen manga takes its toll on more than just the writing of a series, and I don't think it's okay to be blindly supporting such a thing. Even though I think Gege is ruining his own series with how much he over-explains his magic system, while explaining none of the lore or answering the more relevant questions we have, I do understand why it is that way. JJK's magic system is not an inherently bad or poorly written magic system. It just needed a bit more time and care put into it. The reason I'm so scathing of JJK's magic system is simply because of that wasted potential that I feel as a fan of the series. I see a bit of myself in those mistakes as well as a writer. And among all of those things, I also see myself in Gege as a writer because we have both taken inspiration from the same source. Hunter x Hunter is a massively influential story with a magic system that inspired both Gege and myself to write magic systems of our own. I've got a power called Ux in my story, which at its core is meant to be an explanation for why characters in my world can take a boulder to the jaw and be fine, or why a fire magic user does not burn themselves with their own flames. To put things in the simplest terms I've been able to boil my magic system down to, my magic system is about overcoming. Not just overcoming adversity, but overcoming in the literal sense. If someone has an unbreakable armor, then Ux can be used to spear through it. If someone is unkillable, then Ux will make them mortal. If the flames of your fire spell would injure you and prevent you from casting your fire spells, Ux grants you immunity to the heat of your own fire magic. The more you experience, understand, and persevere through everything life has to offer, the more powerful you become. And the more you accept your limitations, the less those limitations will bind you. Basically, do the impossible, see the invisible, row row, fight the power. I've got a lot of details about my magic system which I could gush endlessly about, but I think it's often best to just leave things at the basic concepts since I desire to practice what I'm preaching in this video. Circling back to the point of this video, I think I have a bit more to say about writing a good magic system. Not only do I believe you should learn to maintain an air of mystery in your magic system and only explain the rules when they are relevant, but I also think we need to understand the difference between a complex magic system and a well thought out magic system. As I described before, there's a difference between complexity and simplicity, and either one of those can be either well thought out or convoluted. I've danced around this a bit, but the distinct difference between something which is complex and something which is convoluted or complicated is how much you find yourself having to justify magic's role in the story to your audience. I think that many writers tend to value complexity as if it makes their magic system a deeper, more engaging part of their world, only to end up with something complicated and convoluted instead. Using Frieren as an example once again, Frieren's magic system is great not because it reinvents the wheel, but because it acknowledges that the wheel already fucking exists. And then it uses that wheel to craft a world and story around. There are too many magic systems out there where it feels like the writer has a need to be special with their magic system. They'll often add one or two cheap gimmicks to an already pre-established magic system and then call it a day. And while I feel Frieren's magic system still changes things enough to be distinguishable and unique, it also relies on the viewer's familiarity with the fantasy genre as a whole. And it is a well-chosen magic system at that, because a lot of Frieren's themes are about discovery and making the most of the time that you have. The magic system is equally about discovery and making the most of the time that you have. Remember when I said my own magic system was similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender and Hunter x Hunter? Well, that's a bit of an oversimplification of how my magic system actually works, but that's also how people are going to approach it in their minds. And I'd be able to describe Frieren's magic system in about the same type of way. I could just say that it's Dungeons and Dragons, but instead of spell slots and cantrips, it's just a mana pool. I could say Jujutsu Kaisen's magic system is like Nen from Hunter x Hunter, but with negative human emotions fueling the power instead of life essence. I could do this all day, in fact. My point is that you, as a writer, should not be shy about what your inspirations are when it comes to your magic systems. Even if your magic system is distinct from your inspirations, you should also consider what your audience can assume about your magic system. When writing, sometimes there are rules which do need to be spoken for your audience to understand or assume those things about your magic system. So long as the suspension of disbelief is not broken in the story, then you can get away with revealing less about your magic system. The reason Frieren's magic system is so well written in my eyes is because the writer understands this fact about magic systems. So long as the viewer has a good enough understanding and can make the right assumptions, you've done your job as a writer. But what if you're an audience member who enjoys learning about complex magic systems? I think that's valid, and I'm not advocating for all writers to only give small, vague hints about their magic systems. I'm saying that in order to make a magic system engaging, it's more important to think about the stories you can tell with the rules of your magic system than it is to list off every single rule to your audience with the narrator's voice. This brings me to my next advice about writing better magic systems, and that's to make use of allegories to both tell your story to the audience while also teaching them about your magic system. Put a problem in front of your characters which can only be solved if they understand a unique feature of your magic system. Don't just dump exposition or introduce a new concept in the middle of a fight unless it's been foreshadowed and built up previously. It would be a good habit to get into to write down all of the rules of your magic system and keep that into a separate document, wherein you can then decide how much of that document you want to explain to your audience. Regardless of whether or not you intend to write a hard or soft magic system, you will benefit by establishing rules for yourself and keeping the magic consistent, even if you never confirm or explain it in the story. Figure out which rules are necessary for your audience to know in the moment, and which ones can be explained when it is more relevant to know them. That way, you can do what all fiction writers are meant to do: tell an actual fucking story. But since we're here, why not discuss something else about magic systems as well? We've covered that magic systems should be conveyed in an interesting and relevant way to the audience, but how do we go about making a magic system in the first place? If you've been paying attention this far, I think you already know the answer, and that is, find magic systems to take inspiration from. There are no original ideas in art. New ideas and original concepts are just our life experiences condensed into thoughts. And writing is thought manifested in physical form. When you are writing your fiction, think about the purposes you need the magic system to serve in your world, whether it's just there to be cool, or whether it's something which informs the plot and conflict of your story. Magic should have a purpose one way or another, and you should make some clear goals for what you aim to accomplish with that magic system. Don't be afraid to take a little too much inspiration from other places and walk it back a bit afterward. Magic systems are a trope of writing, and they're a very versatile tool in your tool belt. Sometimes we can even be inspired by that which has disappointed us. There are likely some magic systems which are fantastic on the basic principles, but on the execution, they're just dog shit. And I would say, for those types of magic systems, why spend time speculating about them when you can just write them yourself? Anytime you feel inspired by another story, you should take a second to really internalize why you enjoy those stories and what you enjoy about them. Keep those little notes in your head so that when you're writing something of your own, you can flip through those ideas, and whenever you get an idea or bit of inspiration, you should write those ideas down so that you can flip through those ideas later on. My next advice is to learn the difference between a gimmick and an intentional decision with consequences. A gimmick is when you take something which already exists and then change one thing about it to attract people's attention, all the while pretty much remaining the same and not making anything truly interesting. Do not let your magic system be another story's magic system, but with extra steps. Figure out what rules are useful for the themes and characters of your story. Think about how magic can reflect on your characters and your world. Think about how it can show off the personalities of those characters, or create a sense of wonder in your story. Or, on the other hand, think about how you can make magic something which does not stand out, something which you never explain to the audience, but which still drives a story forward and changes the lives of your characters. Magic systems are about more than just the rules you list off to the audience. They can be used to convey the messages and themes of your story. They can inform a character's personality, their history, and their motivations. A good magic system is one which gets the reader to put themselves into your world. A good magic system gets the reader to fantasize about what their magic powers might look like if they were in your world. A good magic system enables a good story to be told in a way which feels new, even if it might not be new. It helps you capture the emotions and meaning behind what you desire most to convey. In Mary Poppins, magic enables redemption. In Frieren, magic motivates and enables adventure and discovery. In Hunter x Hunter, magic is about sacrifices made for desires fulfilled. In my own world, magic is about remembering the fallen and coming to terms with death to live a meaningful life. In your world, magic can be anything, but it can only exist if you take the time to actually put those thoughts to physical form. The true magic of writing is that we can use it to make our imagination reality. So don't make me spell it out for you, and start writing.